With 2 films down and a 3rd on the way, Fast and the Furious was a franchise in the making.
It was just slick and fun and just oozed coolness.
That's what I'm talking about.
Now approaching its 3rd installment, the real challenge was no longer simply box office, but boxing above its weight again.
Justin, his mission was, I want to have the James Bond opening.
With a rookie new director.
God, there's just so much more pressure.
Cars, but not stars.
They're gonna try to see if the cars are the stars, huh? Well.
The 3rd and 4th installments needed to break the mold.
It seemed a little outrageous.
Break the law.
We had a designated director to get arrested.
It's crazy.
And somehow always find a way to break the barrier.
It was wild, man.
Go faster.
Let's give them the sequel they never fully got.
Basically just go over the top.
That was something else.
Maybe even overdo it.
So if we put Tommy Harper in the hospital.
One of the worst experiences of my life.
Oh, and there was the small matter of resurrecting the dead.
When they said we're gonna bring him back, everyone was like, how's that gonna work?
Following the less than stellar box office return of Too Fast, Too Furious, Universal elected to start over with a brand new creative team, beginning by putting out a call for screenplays.
That's how Chris Morgan came on board.
Universal was quickly drawn to Chris's bold new vision, which took the story far from its New York street racing roots.
Chris Morgan's initial pitch was building a movie around Dominic Toretto going to Japan and avenging the death of a friend.
And while he's there,
He learns about this whole new world of drifting, kind of a subculture within the street racing culture over in Japan.
which of course Dom can't help but partake in. Chris Morgan had been inspired by videos from Japan, which he took to Universal. The studio liked what they were seeing, but had one question.
Drift. What do you mean, drift?
Drifting, the art of getting sideways and burning rubber without losing control of the car,
Drifting goes back to the 90s in Japan.
where it was made popular by one driver in particular.
Tsuchiya.
That's 2-time Le Mans winning driver Keiichi Tsuchiya, aka
Drift King.
He was a road racer, and when he had a big lead, he would celebrate by drifting through the last couple corners, and that became his staple. Obviously, drifting's been around since the tire was invented, but he really turned it into a sport.
Universal agreed drifting was on the money.
There's this drift craze happening in Japan, so how can we capitalize on that?
But that was the problem, the money.
That original pitch from Chris Morgan was just deemed way too expensive. But then they called him back and we're like, okay, the drifting can stay, but we're gonna have to do a different story.
The story had to be different because none of the big name stars were returning.
The idea of getting Paul Walker back became less of a possibility even than getting Vin or anyone else back.
And even if he was available, Universal wasn't so sure they wanted him.
It was rumored that they thought he was too old to continue the franchise if it was just going to be him.
More the demographic at that point, right, of these Fast movies was a younger generation.
So not only did the producers not have any of their familiar stars, they wouldn't have the same budget either.
Actually, we're looking at this as like a $10 million, straight to DVD type movie.
This would be Fast and Furious Jr.
Tokyo Drift is, in some ways, the high school version of the Fast and the Furious.
Why don't you nice boys let your cars do the talking?
Centered on a high school racer from Arizona named Sean Boswell,
I only race for pink slips.
who lands in trouble after some unscheduled home renovation.
Can I get a copy of that?
But Arizona is a long way from Tokyo, so the script called for a big handbrake turn.
So where are we moving this time?
Sent to live with his father.
And I don't want to see or hear about you anywhere near a car.
Sean takes to the local culture and drifts into drifting.
Let's race.
Eventually he has to find a mentor,
Get in.
a character called Han that will show him the ropes. and ultimately he builds his own newfound family the same way as Brian in the original movie finds his family within the racing community.
Not bad.
This group of lost individuals finding a family kind of runs throughout all of them.
But exactly how this would all come together was in the hands of a new director.
Justin Lin signs on. He was known for his indie breakout, Better Luck Tomorrow.
Stop jerking off. Let's go.
Better Luck Tomorrow, I guess it was Justin's take on sort of Goodfellas.
He was pretty fresh out of film school. It's his first movie ever.
Which led to his first studio feature, Annapolis, where he got to work with 2 members of the Fast and Furious family.
Jordana Brewster
Drop it, give me 20.
and Tyrese.
Do you understand me?
For Justin, it was an incredible break.
Fast and Furious 3 would be his biggest movie to date, so Justin brought in people he could trust.
He really liked to have creative people around him that he could count on.
People like editor Fred Raskin.
All of Justin's core group were all relatively young.
Sound editor Peter Brown.
Just remember being like, oh my God, you've got to do Fast and Furious.
And assistant editor Greg Gioria.
Justin's an incredibly loyal guy.
All of whom had worked together on Annapolis.
We were in post, and Justin came in one day, and he had like a DVD of like some drift footage. And I just remember being terrified. Tokyo Drift was a much bigger animal. Oh my God, there's just so much more pressure.
It was also a change of gear for a rising star who landed the lead.
I was 24 years old and probably a little overconfident, cocky, bratty kid. I think it kind of come across in my character.
It's not the ride. It's the rider.
It seemed like it was always a lock that Lucas Black was going to be Sean Boswell.
And while he might be best known for his role in Sling Blade,
Like play football?
Sling Blade with Billy Bob Thornton, that was the career starter that kicked it off.
it was his role in Jarhead that made the studio take notice.
Me, I had to join the Marines or go to jail.
Universal was really high on him from his performance in Jarhead.
If I'd have went to jail, I'd be getting out today.
They trusted me enough to just hire me outright without auditioning for the role. They thought I was perfect for it.
But for a movie set on the streets, Tokyo Drift needed some street cred and found it through music.
Yeah, my ride's one of a kind.
With bringing Bow Wow in, it was third straight movie that the kind of secondary friend character was played by a real-life rapper.
Shit, better get in line.
Take a real good look. This is what you call mutual respect.
A big part of that was the soundtracks of the first 2 movies. The music of street racing culture in real life was a big deal.
My life be like.
With Bow Wow cast as Twinkie.
At least let me drive.
And they had another role in the film. It was a character named Phoenix.
And Justin knew the perfect guy for the role.
Sung Kang had been in Better Luck Tomorrow.
Get the fuck off my car.
Justin loved Sung. He thought he was amazing. He wanted to work with him again. He was someone who hadn't really broken out in a big acting role yet.
And Universal agreed. But Sung Kang wouldn't be playing the character of Phoenix. Instead, they would tailor the role for him, having Sung Kang play a character once again named
Han.
The name's the same, the character is the same.
It's not just, oh, this is a little nod to Better Luck Tomorrow. Like, no, this is the same guy.
And you need me.
But they would have to make a few alterations to make Han more Hollywood friendly.
If you've seen Better Luck Tomorrow, the character of Han does smoke a lot in the movie. So now, the explanation for Han always snacking is that he used to smoke and he quit smoking, so he snacks instead.
And almost as important as casting the actors was sourcing the cars they would drive.
Cute little toys.
The cars are not necessarily built for that kind of extreme driving. They're built to look a certain way and last a couple takes, and then they build 9 of them.
We're building 9 Monte Carlos. Yes, sir. We're gonna wreck them all.
This movie, let's build 5 of them and then take the money saved and make 2 of them really good. Because just like with the driver's skill, the car has to have certain skills also. That was making the cars the stars.
Well, if the cars cast in Tokyo Drift were an actor, their fee would be up there with Vin Diesel.
The budget, I think it was $15 million on just cars.
And if you're wondering how Universal could spend $15 million on just cars, when they said,
we're looking at this as like a $10 million straight-to-DVD type movie.
But they must have realized to do it right was gonna take a little bit more and up the budget to $85 million, giving them plenty of money to do this, and even this. so suddenly.
There was a lot of money to spend.
And they got busy spending it. When shooting got underway in Victorville, California, October of 2005, it was time to move fast and break things.
We did a whole giant car chase for a couple of weeks.
That's how long it took to get the opening action sequence in the can, with nothing but hard driving and practical effects, such as
Monte Carlo through the framed house.
That race scene sets the tone of the whole movie and really shows who my character is.
We had the construction crew build the breakaway on that, and we just built a ramp, and some guy drove right through.
which was followed by a
Monte Carlo barrel roll.
And while that roll was impressive, real magic was happening on the inside.
They put this car through this pipe, and so they just had it on a rotisserie going around in circles. They had all that trash. That is one of my favorite scenes.
But getting these stunts done in a controlled environment was a breeze compared to what would be required in Japan.
In Japan, it's very hard to get permits to film.
It was time to stop breaking cars and start breaking the law.
They were doing a lot of the filming fully illegally.
Japan might be the home of drifting, but Tokyo is just about the last city any crew would want to be filming fast cars in the wild.
When they were filming Tokyo Drift, they could not get permits.
Especially when you're doing it guerrilla style.
They were doing a lot of the filming fully illegally. Whenever they would try to film in the popular areas like Shibuya Crossing, they knew the moment they rolled out any cameras, they probably had around 20 minutes until the police would show up.
The police would see productions going on, they'll come and arrest the director. We couldn't lose Justin Lin, otherwise the production would be shut down. So we had a designated Japanese director on set to get arrested if need be, you know. So it was wild, man.
Permits weren't a problem back in LA, where a humble parking garage was turned into a racetrack.
95% of it was filmed in America. Couldn't tell. The garage is a Hawthorne wall.
But driving and drifting in these enclosed spaces was going to require Hollywood's finest stunt drivers, which in 2005 happened to be this guy.
Yes.
And this guy.
This was like my big breakthrough.
Where Samuel comes from, drifting and driving are often the same thing.
I grew up in northern Sweden above the Arctic Circle. We had snow 7 months a year, so my dad let me start driving when I was very young on frozen lakes where they made ice tracks. So you were sliding the car all the time. Basically, you were drifting, so I learned to drive sideways when I was 8, 9 years old.
Samuel was a test driver for Volvo, but always wanted to get paid to go sideways.
I always had a longing to get into stunt work in Hollywood, so I quit my job and sold everything and moved over here.
Meanwhile, racing driver Tanner's career was literally on ice.
I was an ice driving instructor, so sliding around a lot and loved car control.
So they were both natural fits to double for the lead actors. That is, after they dyed their hair.
Then let's race.
And while it was easy to double for the actors on long shots, to really sell the interior shots, a little sleight of hand was required.
I was sitting in the left seat with a small steering wheel, and he was sitting in another seat next to me, faking driving.
But the boy from Alabama didn't want to fake anything.
I was able to learn how to drift before we started filming. Felt like I picked it up pretty fast. And so the whole time while we were filming, I'm telling Justin Lin, I'm like, look, I can do this scene. And he's like, man, it's gonna be tough.
Justin was right. Some of the driving was considered so risky, it might not be driven at all.
He drifts the car and went that far away from the wall. I was going to do a composite shot and have the editor put it together. But Tanner, he said, I can get close to that wall. And I said, man, I don't know. I don't want to wreck this car. And he drifted that car 3 times about that close to the wall. Whoa!
A lot of people weren't exposed to really what you could do safely drifting.
Lucas, however, was determined to find out on his own.
I would even sneak off while we were filming, get in the car, and then, just a little flip on the sun visor. Keys would fall down. I would go backstage Universal lot and practice and drift. Desperate Housewives were filming. I would just burn rubber through there, and everybody's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm laughing the whole time.
While Lucas was testing everyone's patience on Universal's backlots, the stunt drivers were testing the limits in the real world.
We're here in downtown LA, and you can see we've converted into Tokyo.
Downtown LA had a lot to live up to, impersonating one of Tokyo's most iconic locations.
Shibuya Square, I'm sure they would have loved to drift through in person, but just not possible.
Known for its incandescent sea of humanity, Shibuya Square, Tokyo, was played by a more demure stand-in.
It was a church parking lot behind a Costco or something.
Which created a safe space, but it still needed to be given Tokyo's unique complexion.
And they set up rows of lights on shipping containers, 3 or 4 stories high, to try to mimic the lights that would be on people's faces and on the ground and things like that.
And when they couldn't squeeze any more out of LA's churches and shopping precincts, they simply painted the town green.
Used a bunch of CGI to create some of those buildings with that main street.
We did a lot of the stuff practically, like almost all of it. I only see a couple spots in the film where they digitally put in cars.
Even the camera rigs were burning rubber.
They had this very cool go-kart that had a camera that would actually drive through the crowd, so you get this unique experience.
Creating a kinetic frenzy, all of it building to one of the franchise's key moments in the mother of all drifts.
The idea was that the car was gonna drift sideways for a whole city block and shoot out of the window. And they didn't just hook a car up to chains and just pull it sideways for a full city block.
This was gonna come down to good old-fashioned stunt driving, if they could just think of something.
We had to kind of come up with some things on the spot.
What Tanner and Samuel came up with was kind of backwards.
Me and Tanner, he was in the DK car and I was in the Mazda, and he nosed it into me, and then we were reversing together.
That was 60 miles an hour backwards.
It was a death-defying dance of drifting.
We have the shot, through the windshield, and Han goes and slides through the intersection and gets hit.
Actually, not so death-defying for one key character, in what became one of the franchise's most climactic exits, the death of Han, which upset a lot of people.
There are a lot of really upset people that we were shooting until sunrise every night.
And so, the character who had been imported from another film altogether was very suddenly exported.
So they definitely, were like, oh, this character's dead.
Dead, but not necessarily gone forever. Meanwhile, the fun on the set continued as the lead actor finally convinced the director to give him a real piece of the action.
I'm like, "Justin, hop in the car with me." And I just start drifting. He's like, "Come on, man, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "I want to show you I can drift." He's like, "All right, there's gonna be a scene where you're learning how to drift down the mountain. When we film that scene, you can drift." So that's actually me drifting. That's a dream come true right there. I did get to drift.
But the one drift to rule them all, that was left to the professionals and the San Gabriel Canyon.
I mean, we're going down this mountain. That was the real deal. We didn't do anything CG there.
If you went over this cliff, you weren't walking away. As you're drifting, you're accelerating, so going downhill, it kind of doubles the danger. It was the backside of a dam with these zigzags. It had a super steep slope, but we literally had the tires going over the edges of this cliff, sometimes kicking dirt. It was very dangerous on these skinny little roads with cliffs everywhere.
All that spectacular driving may have been fast, but it still needed something added to make it furious.
I'm in charge of all of the sound except for the music.
Peter's job did involve a kind of music, though. He had to get the notes right. These notes.
Justin knew all the car nuts are gonna go see this movie, so making sure that we had all the accurate engine sounds for every car that's in the movie.
If you go out and record your car, it probably sounds like a hairdryer or a fan. So any car that we record has to be the most outrageous version of that engine.
So production had to go on the hunt for the gnarliest engines around.
If it doesn't have at least 500 horsepower and run on rocket fuel, we're not interested in that car.
In a movie about drifting, the skids had to be more than just skids. Sound designer Peter Brown would take them to the next level by adding
a scream, or a wildcat,
or even this.
The shower door and the sound of that squeegee. If you do it just right, it sounds like a skid.
But even noisy movies need to have their quieter moments.
We used to come up here when we were kids. Even before we could drive, we'd cut class.
Even if the subtlety is a little far-fetched.
This was one sequence where we broke the reality. When you're drifting...
The reality is the noise would be... Well, we'll let Fred explain.
The sounds of the car engines and the tire squeals are so loud you could never possibly have a conversation, but it just really felt right for the movie, so we said, all right, we're just gonna throw reality out the window for this.
Editor Fred Raskin was hired for his strength, cutting subtler scenes like this.
Universal, they had Dallas Pewitt, who had worked on Too Fast, Too Furious. He was going to be co-editing the movie with me, and they primarily wanted him cutting the action scenes and me cutting pretty much everything else.
But then Dallas left the project.
At the time that Dallas left, literally the next day, the big Tokyo chase needed to be edited. And there was only one editor on the movie at that point, and that was me. So although no one wanted me editing the action, I dug in. That's one of my favorite sequences in the movie, because you've got the actual pathos for the characters. It's fun, but it's also like you're concerned with the characters. And then it has the death scene, the emotional toll that takes.
To see if that emotion was working, along with all the action, the cut was previewed to test audiences.
It was well received, but it wasn't the same outrageousness.
It was all to do with the end of the movie.
The original ending was pretty different from the ending that we all know.
In the original ending,
after DK is defeated in the race, all of our heroes are sitting around saying, what are you gonna do next?
Somebody's like, wow, I wish Han could have seen you win today. Like, he would have been so proud.
And then they kind of drift off into the sunset.
Audiences were not really into the ending.
That is to say, the end of Han.
There was an element of sadness to it that left the movie on a bit of a down note.
But the test screenings revealed a bigger problem no amount of tinkering in post could fix.
Audiences felt like, we went to see a Fast and Furious movie, where are Vin Diesel and Paul Walker?
But what if there was still a way to give the audience what it wanted?
What do we have to do to get Vin?
Apparently, grab a 20-sided die and roll for initiative.
Vin Diesel loves Dungeons & Dragons.
Justin went to Vin's house, desperate to convince him to do a cameo. They indulge him in talking and maybe even playing some Dungeons & Dragons, which leads them to talking about mythology.
For Vin Diesel, D&D is a big influence on world building and franchise building.
They eventually spend hours discussing the mythology of the Dominic Toretto character, where it could go, what it could be if he was willing to come back in the franchise.
And Justin must have rolled a critical hit, because eventually
Vin agreed, I'll do a cameo.
And Vin wasn't even worried about his fee. He had a bigger prize in mind.
He negotiates the rights for the Riddick character.
This guy.
All you people are so scared of me.
Not Dominic Toretto, because
the studio owned the rights to both of these.
Pitch Black had happened before Fast and Furious, then he had done Chronicles of Riddick.
I bow to no man.
He wants to keep playing this character and keep, making movies with this character.
So he said,
I want to trade.
You sell Riddick production rights to me, to my company.
The appropriately named One Race Productions, which he formed with his sister Samantha to produce the kind of projects he believed in.
You gotta love the brilliance of One Race Production.
Because it's not just a nod to his Fast and Furious career, but also to his global outlook.
We don't really see the world through the lens of white people or black people or Asian people or Latina people. We see the world through the lens of being one human race.
And with that global perspective, he decided,
I will do a cameo in Tokyo Drift and we'll see what happens after that.
All of which conspired to make this head turn. And this line.
That's right. I won it from my friend Han a few years ago.
Among the most lucrative in Hollywood.
Up until then, there's really no connection to any of the first two movies, right?
Which was a win for Vin, but what had helped the movie.
We screened it, and the moment that Vin hits the screen, the audience burst into applause.
I've never seen a film so transformed with the inclusion of one guy.
No one saw it coming. They just went nuts for it.
It was a very powerful lesson about star power.
A lesson Universal learned too late.
It is not received well. Made a little over 150 million. So for it to even make that much money was a testament to the strength of the fan base and the desire to, good, bad, or indifferent, to want more and more from this world.
You know this ain't no 10-second race.
I got nothing but time.
As for Vin's cameo, that might have saved the film going straight to DVD. It might yet save the franchise.
That cameo was the single thread that every fan clung to. That was kind of the saving grace of the franchise.
The studio had got the message from furious fans.
Universal thought there's still money to be made here. There's still engagement from the audience.
It was successful enough that the studio, they said, okay, Justin, make us another one.
But making the fans happy would involve undoing what had been done. Because,
you know, obviously Sung's done with the franchise, having been killed off in Tokyo Drift. And Justin also was like, okay, that was like a good experience, but like, I'm good. I'm cool with this. I'm done.
Tokyo Drift had burned through one of its best characters and lost its director.
Universal, they had definitely been trying to convince Justin Lin to come back for another one.
The only thing that could save the franchise now was a roast beef sandwich.
Justin says him and Sung were driving up to San Francisco.
They had stopped off to eat somewhere.
They stopped in an Arby's.
And a whole bunch of fans circled around them, and they were so excited to see Han.
They're like, Han, Han, Han. So excited to see Sung Kang. Justin was just kind of taken aback.
And he kind of realized what was percolating in the kind of fan community, that Han was this fascinating character, was so cool, and we were devastated about his death.
So Justin says they get back on the highway, and he's just thinking about kind of the impact of that. And he says to Sung, what a shame that Han's dead. And Sung's like, well, does he have to be?
That was a gestation for Justin to decide, okay, I'm gonna have Han live.
What are you, crazy? Huh? Han is dead, all right?
Han needed to become the Lazarus of illegal street racing and somehow be resurrected.
Is there a way for me to work around the fact that I killed him off?
And Justin Lin decided he could perform the miracle.
He then pulled out his cell phone and called Universal and told them he was in for a fourth movie.
Universal had Justin Lin booked to direct the fourth movie.
Justin called me and said, all right, we're gonna go do another one with Vin Diesel.
The prodigal son had returned as a star and as a producer.
You ready, kid?
At the end of 3, the one thought you have is like, oh my God, like Vin's back.
Vin was in.
You saw what a galvanizing effect bringing back Dom at the end of that film was.
And that really excited the fans and the audience for what was going to happen in the future to the franchise.
Finally, they were getting the band back together, or rather, organizing the family reunion.
Vin is back. Paul is back. Whoa.
To have everybody back and forth.
Food, and family.
I think was the genesis of the catchphrase family.
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 Now I know you guys are a family.
In the later movies, Justin Lin, who was the director for most of those, everything's thematic.
Nothing really matters unless you have a code.
The family staying together, riding together, being together, the loyalty of it.
It makes you think of that first movie.
There's all kinds of family, Brian.
For the fourth movie, its real purpose is to give the fans the sequel they never fully got to the original film.
But in welcoming back Dominic Toretto and the rest, the script gods needed to be appeased.
Justin is like, okay, we're gonna bring the whole beloved original cast back.
But with a little catch.
Oh, and I'm gonna kill off one of the biggest characters in the franchise.
There she is.
Letty would be sacrificed.
I just remember Justin telling me early on that Letty was gonna die.
Justin has never shied away from a bold choice.
I was like, oh gosh, wow.
He really wanted there to be emotional stakes in the movie.
And who doesn't love a good revenge movie?
Revenge meant scriptwriter Chris Morgan had to take us back to the original Fast and the Furious.
The idea was to wrap up the story of Brian and Dom.
I owe you a 10-second car.
At the end of The Fast and the Furious, Brian gives Dom the car keys, he lets him go, and now we've got to resolve that storyline.
Figure it out.
Letty is abandoned by Dom, who thinks the police are about to come in on them, and eventually that leads to her death.
She's been murdered.
Letty's death really gives the motivation for Dom throughout the film.
Sorry, I'm late.
Brian still works for the FBI.
We bust the bad guys.
They're brought back together.
Just like old times.
And Dom and Brian, they have to work together regardless of their feelings for each other to avenge the death of Letty.
But killing off a character is a breeze. The real challenge is reanimating a dead one.
Han, when they said we're gonna bring him back, everyone was like, how's that gonna work?
Because there was no walking this back.
Han is dead, all right?
The only way to bring Han back was to go back in time.
Wow.
Sneaking a little prequel into the sequel.
All right, we're good to go.
The opening tanker sequence takes place before Tokyo Drift.
I thought we'd be robbing banks by now.
That's this explosive scene in Fast 4.
The rest of the movie takes place after.
Time for you to go do your own thing.
And pointed to the future to connect the dots.
Heard they're doing some crazy shit in Tokyo.
It made Dom and Han's adventures a little bit more legendary.
The opening was just what Justin Lin had always wanted.
Justin, his mission was, I want to have the James Bond opening.
Bond, James Bond.
Meaning an overture of action as spectacular as it was improbable.
This is major, massive set pieces, the likes of which has not been in the first 3 movies.
That put veteran stunt coordinator and second unit director Mick Rogers back on the front line.
So the whole opening sequence, that's all second unit, that's all stuff I shot.
And Mick had a new toy to play with.
Buick's new Regal. It's trim, it's light, it's affordable.
Well, not a regular Buick.
We built a car backwards so it's more controllable. We could throw a front 180 into the trucks, drive backwards, and then dropping her down on a flying rig while we're going 60 miles an hour. It's all real, there's no CG.
So real, even the gas tanks needed their own stunt drivers.
We built steerable tankers.
We got Gene driving the regular tanker, and then we got Kenny driving the self-drive tanker.
Where we had a guy in the tanker that could actually steer it.
There's been lots of action in the first 3 movies, but this is on a whole different level.
And if you're gonna go big, why not go massive?
You know, we're suspending disbelief here a lot.
That was the point of the series, where it starts to go to a different direction.
So much, this tumbling tanker could only be made to happen digitally.
It's CGI where it flips over the car.
But it didn't have to be.
I had it rigged, I knew how to do it, but it's like, you know, they didn't want to do that.
The finale, however, that definitely happened just as Matt Sweeney planned it.
When it hits this, there's going to be another small explosion, and the whole thing is going to be moving. That crash over the hill, we did that all for real. 8 5-gallon jugs of gasoline hit the button. Huge explosion, and then the thing tumbled down the hill on fire.
While Han was brought back to life by going back to the future, another fan favorite would be ejected from the franchise against her wishes. Fast and the Furious 4 saw a new member joining the family when a beauty queen catwalked into the chaos as Giselle.
Are you one of those boys who prefers cars to women?
Israeli national treasure Gal Gadot.
She was formerly Miss Israel. Her background on camera was extraordinarily limited.
It was her first steps in Hollywood.
She stood out. I was not remotely surprised that she's the one that Justin went with.
She was in the army, so you know, she brought a lot to that character where there was just a toughness and a real authenticity.
You could tell, like, she could handle action.
All right, everybody sync up.
Also new in Fast 4 was the tech.
Please wait while directions are downloaded.
The street racing was back, and it had moved with the times.
You know, I am the voice of GPS.
Assistant editor Lee Folsom Boyd was leaving her mark.
Rerouting.
Just shut up!
That was fun.
You are 2.6 miles from destination.
Had so many people ask me for GPS directions.
Also back for Fast 4 were the franchise's most trusted stunt drivers.
We did some slides around LA, but the thing that struck me about the fourth film, there was so much less about the driving than the third one because you did have these actors that were carrying the film.
You sure about this?
Trust me.
But the old school Hollywood stunt driving didn't come cheap.
The race went like $2 million over budget because it was not well planned out. There were 3 major action sequences. The first sequence and the last sequence were fully planned out in advance of shooting, but the race was not.
A lot of action sequences are not written in the script in a detailed way. When you're planning action sequences, the ideal is to have everything storyboarded out before shooting. But there were so many different environments that Chase went through, and that was constantly evolving through pre-production.
And that was sort of the last time that Justin shot anything without having it completely planned out, because part of that had to be shot a couple times.
Arguably, the most crucial scene in the movie also had to be shot twice, but for very different reasons.
Michelle, she gets killed off early in the movie. She asked that they shoot it 2 different ways.
Michelle Rodriguez wasn't giving up her character Letty without a fight.
I don't think she was incredibly on board with it.
She was being kind of insistent that I want you to keep the option open that maybe there's a world where this isn't the end for Letty.
She was like, you know, I'm a beloved character.
She was convinced people aren't going to be happy.
But the production didn't have time to overthink it, as Fast and Furious was heading south of the border.
Welcome to Mexico, boys.
Towards the end of the schedule, we went to Magdalena in Mexico.
The tiny town of Magdalena was slowly overtaken by the Fast and Furious circus.
He's been invaded by a crew over 500 technicians.
And for a tiny moment in time, a little bit of Hollywood and a little bit of Mexico became one.
The Fast and the Furious. It speaks to us Latinos like probably no other franchise out there.
And Vin isn't one to disappoint.
Mi gente, mi gente. La lengua es diferente, pero la sangre es la misma.
And for the population there in this little town, this was a lifetime of an event.
But Magdalena's most epic moment, the chase out of town, was actually shot on a California lake bed with the crew set up for a never-before attempted stunt. They loaded 2 Cadillacs and a Chevy Suburban with 5-gallon air cannons and positioned them on the passenger sides. The cannons were designed to fire 800,000 pounds of air pressure, which was sure to send the cars and their drivers tumbling.
You want to make it feel dangerous and at the same time being completely safe.
Achieving the former was the easy part.
Don't get caught behind them, because we'll never see and dust will kill them.
As for making it safe, well, the cannons went off as expected. There were some unintended consequences.
We put Tommy Harper in the hospital, unfortunately, with a roll.
You want to sit down?
Luckily, he would be okay.
Things happen that you don't want to happen, but it's not 99% sure on a lot of stuff, you know.
Thankfully, the very dangerous chase scene that followed would be shot in a completely different way.
It was crazy the way they did that as far as like filming it.
As the cars went indoors and behind the curtain.
There was a curtain dividing and, you know, making the tunnel.
That tunnel sequence, we did that in a warehouse. We blew a car up, T-boned a car right in the middle of the tunnel.
Action! Green screen shooting added the claustrophobic exhilaration of a tunnel chase.
The majority of the visual effects was that race through the tunnels. Heavy visual effects. The cars, they had to figure out how to get them moving. I think that was challenging.
When production wrapped in June 2008, this became just one of many visual effects problems to be solved much quicker than anyone expected.
Fast and Furious was supposed to come out in July.
Multiple editors attacked the mountain of footage.
I think we started this as like a 25-week post and then realized that the visual effects were going to take a lot longer.
Even with time running out and the pressure on.
The studio screened a cut of the movie.
Fast and Furious was about to become a victim of its own success.
Universal felt like this new formula, these tweaks we've made, the direction we're taking it in is clearly working.
And moved the release of Fast up from July to April.
which was a full 3 months earlier than planned.
And so it meant, the schedule got pretty damn hairy.
The visual effects were such a struggle that it just came right down to the wire. That was probably one of the worst experiences of my life.
Thanks to an accelerated release date, Fast and Furious was truly becoming exactly that in post.
No one likes to have time taken away from them, especially when you're expecting you're gonna have several weeks additionally.
Despite a plethora of real stunts and practical effects, finishing the visual effects was like making the movie all over again.
It was a very big movie with a lot of complex visual effects.
But not a lot of time.
You've got to accelerate your schedule to the nth degree and have it look really good.
And just like the stunts, post-production feats of digital daring would be pushing the boundaries.
The opening tanker scene, bouncing along on fire, it was at the limit of what visual effects could do at the time.
Suddenly, the stunt performers weren't the only crew to find themselves in harm's way.
I have scars from that, physical and mental scars.
It's post-traumatic stress disorder.
The schedule was 7 days a week, 24/7, whatever it takes, we're getting this done.
And that meant producers and editors virtually camping at work.
We had worked the cutting room so many days in a row that they all ran out of clothes. They couldn't do laundry, they were just working like 24/7.
I don't know how we pulled it off. But when you're working for someone who's passionate and knows where he's going, you follow him to the ends of the earth.
I used to say with Justin that, the film would never be done unless you saw dawn on the last day.
Justin Lin emerged into the light in time for Fast and Furious to make its release deadline.
Universal felt like this is gonna open maybe for lucky mid-55 million, which back then was a big, big number.
You could say April the 10th, 2009 was the day a franchise was born. Despite a chaotic upbringing and a very blended family, Fast and Furious had finally found itself, 4 films deep, and about to go much deeper.
I don't think anyone expected Fast 4 to hit in the way it did.
People were excited for that movie in a way that they hadn't been since the first one.
The improbable family reunion of characters was cheered by all.
Fast 4 was received exponentially better than 3 or 2 had been, both by fans and critics alike.
Do you know each other?
Fans couldn't believe that they found a way to bring Dom and Brian back together.
He used to date my sister.
That both made sense and was entertaining and interesting and kind of completed their arc.
I ain't running anymore.
What binds the characters together and what all the stories are ultimately based on, it's their likability for each other and their loyalty.
Made for $85 million, the most expensive Fast movie yet took in $70 million on its opening weekend alone.
At the time, it was a record-breaking opening, the highest opening weekend in April ever.
And it kept charging towards $360 million worldwide.
So it just blew past the expectations.
In a world still reeling from the global financial crisis, it was a triumph over the odds.
It was sweet validation for everything that Justin did.
Was a massive leap forward for the franchise, and that's a big payday for the studio. That's the biggest they had made off of any of these films thus far. It proved that the audience wanted those original characters back. It proved that this makes a bunch of money. It was definitely a signal of things to come.
But instead of taking the win and playing it safe, Justin and Universal decided to reinvent the franchise yet again, leaving crew members to think,
this is insane. This is never gonna work.